Hello, everybody. I am still on tour. I am still on my 16 state tour of the US hosting contact events. And I've had some really cool experiences during my touring. I'm hosting 24 in person alien contact events around the US. And in the last few events, I've passed through Florida and I've passed through Gulf Shores, Alabama, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and there's been some interesting experiences. I have encountered some wonderful, wonderful people. I've encountered just walking around some of the nicest people you can imagine anywhere. One example is while I was walking around the Gulf Shores. I'm walking around trying to find the location where I can access the beach where my event was. And just three really nice ladies just said, "Hey, are you okay? Can I help you? Can we help you with anything?" And we got into a conversation. And they were there because they were helping people out to find whatever they wanted to find. But they were doing it because their purpose was to help people. They had chosen to do that as a job, and they really went. They were really kind and polite and interested, and asking me what am I doing, and why am I trying to find the beach? And when I mentioned UFOs, one of them knew of this subject really, really well and started to talk to me about the subject. And it seemed very synchronous, like synchronicity, like almost coincidental. And the other two ladies were very interested in the subject, also very spiritual. And we ended up having a really nice chat. And it's just people talking to people. It's one of the joys of in life when good people meet good people and can have a conversation. And then I walked off and I parked my car a long way off in a Walmart parking lot, which is my typical home when I'm on tour, which is where I am right now. And and as I'm walking along, about 30 minutes after I'd had this conversation with the three ladies, a car pulls up beside me, and some people waving at me from the inside, and I just kind of dismiss it because I don't know anybody there. And then I realize it's these three women, and I say hello, and they say we were just heading off for a drink. Do you want to join us? And ended up having a really lovely evening, talking with some really nice people. That sort of situation where the power of just smiling and talking and being nice can enrich the world, can enrich other people's lives, and we all have the ability to do that. So why not do that? Let's see. When I today was in Planet Fitness. That's how I keep sort of fit and healthy while I'm doing my touring. Um, you know, when you leave somewhere like when you leave Planet Fitness, there's different branches all around the country. Um, Often they will look up and say, "Well, thanks very much for coming," and that sometimes that's delivered in a very genuine way, and sometimes not so much. And when it's done in a very genuine way, that is uplifting. It's nice. It's probably what they're supposed to do. It's probably what they're told to do, but still, it's nice. It's a nice, friendly face giving you a smile and saying, have a nice day. Thank you for coming." And it's noticeable, therefore, when you travel to some Planet Fitnesses and when you leave, the person, um, like when I was in Louisiana in the Planet Fitness there, and I turned as I walked out and I said, "Thanks very much." And the man that was standing there looked at me like I was inconveniencing him by saying, "Thank you, have a nice day," and just looked at me with a blank expression. And that's the opposite. And there's both kinds of people in this world. And, I hope that you're one of those people that will go out of your way to be friendly and nice. And as I was leaving the Planet Fitness a couple of hours ago where am I? I am in Houston, Texas. Um, I'm on the inside waiting to come out, and somebody on the outside comes in at that same time, and he gets most of the way in through the door, sees that I'm there, and he backs out of the Planet Fitness. He's already inside, but he backs out and opens the door for me so I can get out. And it's just a very nice, friendly act that this person did to inconvenience himself in order to let me out. So these are the little things in our lives where there are good people, and I encourage everybody to be the same. I try and do that when I can, and I encourage you all to do that whenever you can. And then also when you're on tour, as well as seeing the best of humanity, you get to see the worst of humanity. You get to see what humanity is like in its best form and in its worst form. I told you that the title of the show last week was the curse of imposition, and I don't know. I'm not going to say I genuinely think this, but it's extraordinary, statistically speaking, how frequently when I park somewhere in my car, another vehicle pulls up right next to me with loud music on, windows open, air conditioning running, so lot of noise. And that happened to me a week or two ago, and I think I might have mentioned this before, but this happened to me when I was sleeping. So this is like midnight, and a big truck right next to me. They didn't need to park next to me because it is nighttime and there's lots of spaces available, and they break out the beer and they start partying right next to me. So I slowly wake up and pull myself into the driving seat and drive to the other side of the parking lot. And when I got up in the morning, I noticed that they had keyed my car. And these are inconsiderate people who went out of their way to hurt me. There are people out there like that who enjoy hurting others. Probably a big joke that they had the evening before, sneaking up to my car and seeing what they could do to key my car, to hurt me, to damage my vehicle, my property, my well-being, my finances. So you see the worst in people, you see the best in people, and that is what humanity is. And it's both of those aspects of who we are, I think, within most people. But it's what you then choose to do with your instincts, with your feelings, with your ideas. It's how you choose to act that really defines who you are. So just a little bit there about humanity, getting the perspective of traveling around, talking to different people, interacting with different people. Of course, there's far worse things going on in some countries around the world. And I do, there's a lot on my mind at the moment because I'm involved in a lot of different things, and this might not seem like a very smooth line of reasoning of thought, but I'm planning a trip after this to see my family. I don't get to see my family very often because most of them are in England, and I'm planning my trip. And let's see, where was I going with this? As I completely lost my train of thought there. Where was I going with that? Okay, I will change subject and move on to my next item. It'll come back to me. While I'm planning my trip, I am looking at different places in Europe that I could visit, maybe even host an event in. And in one of those places in Europe, in Cologne, Germany, I found something very interesting. And this started a whole big intellectual research thought process that's been happening over the last week. Because in Cologne, or as they say in Germany, Köln, there is quite close to the main train station, quite close to the amazing Gothic cathedral there. There is a little market square, and in that market square, there is a large fountain that has sculptures of, they describe it as Einzelmädchen, Einzelmädchen. And the origin of that word is not completely understood, but what Einzelmädchen is, that's their name for little dwarf or elf-like creatures who they have myths about in Cologne. And this statue is over 100 years, this statue and fountain, this whole area, the Heinzelmädchenbrunnen, is over 100 years old. And it's dedicated to these small beings. Okay, so these small beings, I'm very interested, as you know, in all different paranormal and supernatural entities. And I started, as soon as I saw this while I was researching my trip, I thought, oh, that looks interesting. Supernatural beings. I'm going to look into that. And apparently there is a myth, a legend, folk stories in the area of at one time in Cologne or Köln, there being people having just really, really nice lives, relaxed, lazy, easygoing lives, because the jobs that they were involved in doing, a lot of those jobs got done by these little people in the nighttime for them. So that's a nice little story there. And there was a tailor who lived there, a tailor and the tailor's wife who lived there, and they were curious to know who was doing all of these jobs for them in the night. And their curiosity caused the tailor's wife to stay up late at night and try and observe the beings. And she put down peas all over the floor so that when they would come in, they would slip up on the peas. She would hear it. She would be able to come out and look before they disappeared off. And it worked. These beings came out and slipped up on the peas, and she looked out and she saw them, and these little creatures, and she was happy that she got to see who they were and what was going on. But they were not very impressed because they'd slipped up and fallen over, and their secret identity had been revealed, and they disappeared away and never came back. And from then onwards, the people of Cologne have had to do all of their work themselves. So it's a nice little interesting story, just because there's some kind of maybe a dwarf-like or an elf-like creature. And then I did a bit more research on elf-like creatures, because the origin of elves is from Germany or Germanic countries, that whole area, and going back earlier in time in the Norse culture, so that whole Scandinavian area. And one of the things that came up, obviously, as I'm looking at these German creatures who do work for people at nighttime, one thing that popped into my head, well, how about the elves and the shoemaker? Because that's a very similar story. And I did some research on that, and that story comes from the Grimm Brothers collection of fairy tales in that area of the world. And so I've started to listen through audio recordings of people stating or reading through those stories, and they're very interesting stories. A lot of them, a lot of those stories, the Grimm stories, are what Disney fairy tales are based on, like Snow White and Rapunzel, various different stories like that. And so they have sort of a Disney kind of feel to them. There's lots of talking animals, but there's talking stones, there's talking beans, there's talking straws. Everything seems to be alive and have a consciousness of its own. There's like stories about living sausages that swim around in the vegetable stew before it's served, so that people can then have a nice flavour in the stew, in the casserole. So it's quite bizarre, and a lot of the stories is like, well, what's the point in this story? That it's from a different time, a different culture. You can tell they're from a different time when you look at things like Snow White, and you realise, Snow White, this girl is 7 years old. And at the end of the story, after she finally gets saved and woken up, this 7-year-old Snow White marries the prince, I think it is. And it's like a little bit like, okay, that's not something that would happen in today's world. So there's lots of elements within there that you're thinking, that's very odd. That's very different. That's not what we have today. And so it's a fascinating experience in general, but it turns out that the Elves and the Shoemaker story it's actually 3 stories within the Grimm Brothers Fairy Tales, and I haven't got to read through all of these stories, but the Elves and the Shoemaker story is very similar to the Heinzel Mädchen story. It's a person with a skill, not a tailor, but a shoemaker, and they're very poor, and they've got enough leather to make one more set of shoes, and so they prepare that, and then that evening somebody comes in the night and with great skill takes the leather that's been prepared and makes this beautiful pair of shoes. And eventually they discover, the shoemaker and his wife stay up and they look and they discover that there are little people coming at night time, making their shoes for them, doing work for them with great skill. Those elves were seen as being very nice, benevolent, doing good things for them. Coming at night time, benevolent alien beings. And the word elf is just how it was translated. What was the actual word? I think the true translation was more like white men, not white as in WHITE, but WIGHT, white. And there's 2 different possibilities I've heard about what that means. That means either literally white, like the color, or very bright, so beings of light, men of lightness, or it means thing or creature, so creature man, which is interesting because creature man is like non-human, like a cryptid. So the word elf is a translation, and who knows if that's the same thing that was intended when the story was written. But that's one of the stories, and I'll be, if I have to analyze this carefully, logically, I would say that aliens don't tend to come in to our homes at night and do work for us. So the alien connection is a bit tenuous there. But one of the stories, which I haven't got to yet, but I've read a summary of it. One of the stories has these elves come in at night time and take the babies of some women during the night and replace those babies with something that is translated to be changeling, but basically is a human looking but not quite human being. And then I'm thinking, okay, now we're moving into the direction of what today we consider at least some species of aliens to be. Even though most of the alien beings that are around us that we communicate with are very helpful. I would even go so far as to say benevolent. They're supportive. They're kind. They guide us. They protect us. When I say us, if you build up a relationship with them, if they like you, they can be very, very nice to you. But there are some species of aliens who do uh, take men and women during the night without prior permission to do reproductive things on them. And the whole judging of that is a moral issue and is subjective. And a lot of people have different opinions about that. Uh, in general, I would say that taking people without their permission in the night and doing reproductive things on them is not something we would consider to be moral. Not something I would consider to be moral. It's an imposition upon somebody in a very personal way. However, my perspective gives me the ability to look and say, well, these beings might not know and probably don't know fully how traumatic that might be for us. Well, I think they probably do know. They try and take away that trauma. They take away our memories. They're kind to us when this is going on. But they feel that there's a higher purpose. They feel that they're right. They're justified in doing it in a similar way that people, that human beings feel that it's okay to take animals like a cow and impregnate the cow artificially so that they will produce milk, and then we utilize that milk. That's comparable. But the humans who are involved in drinking milk and eating cheese and yogurt and ice cream, they're not actively evil people for paying for those things to happen to the cows. So I think some of these aliens, their morality is sort of comparable to that. Um, and but the fact is that it is going on, and some of those aliens are tall, and some of those aliens are short, and that's something that I've been able to absolutely 100% conclude is real. I know that some people in the contact world, the UFO community, uh, they reject that those aliens are doing anything bad at all, and that the only abductions that occur are human beings doing the abductions. But that just simply doesn't add up, because abductions have been happening forever, long before humans got involved in some of the abductions. So, so in the world we live in today, we've got short aliens, we've got tall aliens who are involved in taking men and women at nighttime, mostly women at nighttime, impregnating them, and often the women don't even realize they've been impregnated, and then 2 or 3 months later, coming in and taking those babies from them. And in the one of the Elf and the Shoemaker, or one of the Grimm Brothers stories, there are small creatures who come at nighttime, that they're translated as being elves. They come at nighttime and they switch out they take babies from women and replace them with other non-human but human-looking babies. And a lot of women that I've talked to feel that maybe the babies that they do have, in reality, there was alien involvement in the babies and the children that they presently have. So there's a very strong connection between what I know reality to be and what is in one of the Grimm Brothers fairy tales or folk tales of that time in coming from Germany, from medieval Germany, from maybe before that in the Norse history, which is very interesting. And then it got me thinking, well, are elves aliens? Did aliens come in at that time and they called them Einzelmädchen or white? I forget the. I'm not sure if I read the actual German text back then, but white men or creature men, are those the aliens that we know today, we know of today? And I apologize if there's noise around me, but I'm in a Walmart parking lot and there is noise around me. Um, so then I started to research elves a little bit more, and I started to dig deeper back into the history of elves. And it turns back that if you go right back to the earliest known literature that contains anything elf-like, there seem to be two types of elves. It's like elf is a category of which there are tall elves who move through the sky, who are called light elves, and there are short elves or beings, sometimes called dwarfs, who live under the ground and who are called dark elves. And that sounds very similar to greys or grey-like beings. And this is the earliest. These are the earliest written, the earliest known written elf stories. And there's tall beings of light, elves of light, and there's short elves of darkness. That sounds like very similar to what we've got today. Now, I personally wouldn't categorize all of the different alien species out there, quite like that. But it's very similar to what I observe today. So I have found this to be very interesting. And upon researching this whole subject, I discovered that there's a word which translated in some of these early texts is translated as elf disc or elf wheel. And that is the translation, elf disc or elf wheel. And these beings are associated with these discs and these wheels, elf discs and elf wheels, especially the beings of light. And in the past, when literary scholars have seen those words, elf disc and elf wheel, they have interpreted or translated those as meaning the sun, which could be possible that that's what the people of that time were really meant those words to mean. But if we think that elves might be aliens, then could an elf disc or an elf wheel, could they be flying saucers? Seems very probable to me that an elf disc or an alien disc is a flying saucer. And you can see, if you look across different cultures, you can see analogies to that. You can see other examples of that sort of thing happening. For example, in ancient Egypt, there are images, there are pictures sculpted into temples and painted as hieroglyphs of discs with wings. A disc or a circle with wings either side. And what we're talking about is a flying disc. And those flying discs in the past have been interpreted by scholars as the sun. A flying disk is the sun. The sun flies through the sky. But what other disks fly through the sky? Flying saucers. Could those flying disks, those disks with wings, actually represent flying saucers? And that idea, that theory might be, well, it is supported by, when you look at some of these sculptures, they have discs behind their heads, discs around their heads. And they're not globes, but behind their heads, it's like a frisbee, like a plate behind the head, but it's symmetrical. Plates behind their heads or discs behind their heads. For example, when I went to the British Museum last time, there are tall ancient Egyptian statues of humanoids with the faces of lions, the heads of lions, and behind their heads are discs. And the shape of those discs, if you look at them three-dimensionally, they are the shape of like a discus, like an actual flying saucer. They are not the shape of the sun. So that also adds credence to the theory that these discs are actually flying saucers. So when they put these discs behind the heads, then what they're saying is these are beings from flying saucers. Or these are beings strongly connected with flying saucers. Maybe their origins from flying saucers. Any of those interpretations. Maybe those flying saucers were flying around actively at that time, and they were just coming in and out of them. But these are beings from flying saucers. And then, of course, you can jump to other cultures as well, because the Egyptian culture feeds into Christian cultures. And if you look in Christian cultures, you look at many other Asian countries around the world, Asian countries in Asia rather, in their religions, there are quite frequently discs or rings of light behind or above people's heads. Not just any people who have been elevated in status to being something special, to being of religious significance or spiritual significance. I'm talking about halos. Now, halos are not just confined to Christian religion, they're across many religions and dating back from pre-Christian times. And sometimes something that adds strength to this is, well, maybe that those halos are some kind of spiritual emanation. Okay, but auras or spiritual emanations are not just around the head. So what's going on with that? The auras are all around the body and not in the shape of a disc. So the fact that a spiritual representation of something glowing but is behind the head or behind the entire body in a circle in a disc shape, those things seem to, in my opinion, be more likely to represent flying saucers than auras. So I think throughout a lot of different cultures, you very probably have, if you look back at their old stories, their old fairy tales, tales about elves, tales about dwarfs, tales about non-human entities. When you look at those stories and then consider the possibility, could those beings be what we now call aliens? Short aliens, tall aliens. Then I think my personal answer to that is, well, I can't know for sure because I wasn't the person that wrote those stories down. But it seems very likely to me that the reality that we have today with these aliens around us is they had the same reality back then. And they also had psychics back then. They had mediums. They had people that were spiritually perceptive. They had people who were being taken by aliens in the night to have reproductive things done to them. They too had encounters with benevolent aliens, and maybe sometimes aliens that are not so benevolent. And whereas we use the word alien or often extraterrestrial, and we often think of them as coming from other planets. This is just our language and our frame of reference. Back then, they didn't have that frame of reference. They didn't know about space like we know today. They didn't know about what the planets are and what the sun is and what the stars are. They didn't know the geography of the universe like we do. And back then, they used words and stories that were different, but they basically mean the same thing. They are words that are describing the same thing. When you look at Old Norse mythology, one name that you're probably very familiar with is Thor, the god Thor. And it's interesting because if you look at the old texts, the old stories of Thor, he had with him often, usually two, sometimes other numbers, but he was associated with elves. He would have two elves as sort of intermediaries between him and humans. So you have a god with two elves, beings of light, with him. So that's interesting because, okay, that it shows the extent to which non-human entities are associated with our old stories. But there's also a connection to what they would have called, what they described as a god. And in Christianity today, and throughout hundreds of years, there's been this notion of beings of light who are like intermediaries between God and humans. I'm talking about angels. And in fact, I'm not really knowledgeable about religion, so I apologize if I'm not saying this as accurately as a Christian, as a devout Christian might, but I'm pretty sure that Lucifer, or the devil, used to be an angel and was a fallen angel, and you have beings of light and beings of darkness who are these supernatural entities, and you have angels, you have demons, and those angels and demons are comparable to the dark elves and the light elves, the light elves and the dark elves. Could these words, dark elf and light elf, be describing the same entities of reality, in reality, that angels and demons are describing? When you really look across religions and ancient stories, and fairy tales and folk tales, you really see that there's a lot of commonalities, and they might all be describing the same things. The story, one of the weird things I think in the stories, those old Germanic stories about the elves and the shoemaker and the what are they called, the Heinzelmädchen. One of the weird things is that these beings are described as little naked mannequins, little naked people. And that word naked comes into those stories. And, okay, that's a little odd. But if we look at reality, that these alien beings, to us, I've heard people like Ingo Swann, when he remote viewed the beings on the moon for, I don't know, some secret industrial, mostly complex organization many decades ago. when Ingo Swann was asked to remote view the moon, he described seeing little naked people. When people, the classic image of an alien that people see, often these beings, not always, but often these beings seem to, well, what I think is going on is that they're wearing skin tight clothing, sort of jumpsuits that cling to the body and don't have obvious zippers or buttons. And so they can appear to be, to somebody at a brief glance, naked, but in fact, they're wearing skin tight jumpsuits or clothing, a lot of them, not all of them. Some of them are far more sort of Queen Amidala in like Arcturians with big high collars and regal clothing. So that's another commonality between what the beings seem to be wearing today and what these beings are described as appearing like in those old stories. Okay, I'm looking at my notes here to see what's next. So this is all very interesting with the elves, and I encourage people to go and do your own research. Maybe listen, there's some good YouTube videos on the history of elves and dwarfs and things like that. It's funny to think that when we watch something like the Disney cartoon Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, do they mean those dwarfs to be small human beings, or do they actually mean those dwarfs to be aliens? It gets one thinking, and I don't know all of the answers, but speculating is certainly fun and opens up various different theories. So yeah, go out there and watch some of those YouTube videos, do some of your own research, look at some of the early translations of some of those stories about elves and dwarfs and other beings that are out there. Fairies, who knows, maybe fairies is also fits into that category. But fairies is not something that I've researched extensively, so I'm not going to talk about them now. Moving on from that subject, there's just two or three other things that I think, as I'm driving along in my touring, they pop into my head, and I think I should probably talk a little bit about that. One of the things is people feeling like they know something when they all believe something. And I know I've talked about this a lot before, but I'm going to give a couple of examples. I have friends who are out there, and we are friends who have different beliefs, different opinions to myself. And from time to time, some of them try to get me to consider viewpoints that are different from my current viewpoints. And they're my friends, but I don't consider some of the things that all of my friends do to be correct or right. And sometimes they impose upon me emails, texts, messages, where they are clearly trying to convert me, convince me of something that is different from what I currently consider to be reality. Now, sometimes you might have a relationship with somebody where that's okay. You talk about things like that. You have that sort of social understanding that that's okay in your relationship. And whether or not that's right or wrong depends on your personal relationship with those personal people. But sometimes I think it would be true to say that some people try to push or force or pressure their beliefs upon others. And I'm going to say now that a lot of the time, that, in my subjective moral opinion, is not okay. It is an imposition. It is also not being in harmony with how you both are. It's not being in harmony with the friendship as it presently is. It is it is imposing thought and time and energy and effort on other people who have not asked for it. Now, if they ask for it, then that's a different matter. If it's optional, like, I'm telling you lots of my opinions, but it's optional for you to listen, because you can choose to watch me or turn off your device or watch something else. So I'm not imposing anything upon people. But somebody messaged me a few weeks ago and tried to convince me, in an ongoing effort, that my knowledge about how the universe started, the Big Bang, is not correct. Now, I am a trained cosmologist, space scientist. I have gone to university and I have got a degree, a first-class honours degree. It's a high-level pass in England, a first-class honours degree in physics with space science and technology. And then I continued on to do X-ray astrophysics research. That's astrophysics, that's cosmology, that's space, that's science. Science which uses very, very high power, extensive use of logic to determine reality. And I know that the things that I learned are true. Now, I learned that there are margins of error on a lot of the things that I learned as being true, like exactly how old is the universe. There was always a big margin of error on that. And during my lifetime, that margin of error has got smaller and smaller and smaller. So I understand that there are margins of error. That's not an error that scientists are making. That's an understanding of the range of possibilities. So maybe that term margin of error is misunderstood sometimes. And good astrophysicists, good scientists, qualified scientists, generally know that there is a lot of stuff that we don't know. Scientists know we don't understand what dark matter is, what dark energy is. We're still trying to work out the problem of the asymmetry of matter and antimatter in the universe. So science is based on knowledge of what we know, what we don't know. And somebody sent me a message a couple of weeks ago, and they said about the Big Bang, the truth is nobody knows. And this is a good friend of mine. I would even say that I have love for this good friend of mine. But when they say the truth is nobody knows, there is nothing correct about that sentence. There's nothing wise about that sentence. How can anybody know what other people know? Certainly about science, but even about other things, about things for which proof is not as readily available. Things like elves. I don't know what other people know about elves. I don't know what other people know and don't know about aliens. So please, people listening to this, never say nobody knows, and never preface it with the truth is nobody knows, because that is not a wise thing to say. And don't try and convince scientists that their knowledge is not correct, but your beliefs are, when knowledge is something that requires proof and has been proved, and belief is something that requires an absence of proof. There is no logically convincing somebody that a belief is correct when it's contrary to knowledge. So I ask people to exercise a little bit of wisdom in that area. I did uh, go to a party a couple of months ago, and as soon as somebody asked, "What's your background?" and I said, "I'm space science, have a degree in space science and technology." When they then proceeded to tell, this is actually two different people. One person proceeded to try to convince me that the moon landings didn't happen, which is nonsense. They did happen. uh, and then the other person tried to convince me again that the Big Bang didn't happen, which is nonsense. We can see it. We can look into space and we can see the afterglow of the Big Bang, exactly where it should be. It's called the cosmic microwave background radiation. Um, these are not wise things for people with beliefs to, with conviction, try and convince somebody with knowledge that they're incorrect. I would even go so far as to say that it's not wise for people with beliefs to try and convince other people who also have beliefs that their beliefs are wrong. Uh, it, there's no wisdom in imposing upon people anything at all. But I think there's also wisdom in understanding that some people are experts in a field because they have learned knowledge, and you just can't go and argue with those people because knowledge is different from belief. Um, so those are the things that I wanted to talk to you about today. I encourage people to please be wise, be respectful to others, try and brighten people's days by smiling and saying nice things and opening doors for people and being kind. Um, Notice people, look at them, smile at them, be nice, and go out there and investigate dwarfs and fairy tales, the Grimm Brothers stories, which are a bit bizarre in places but very interesting. Certainly give you a different perspective on how people used to be. And don't tell people that they don't know things. That when you don't know if they know or don't know things. I would like to wish everybody peace, love, and happiness, and you all take care. I look forward to seeing you next week. Goodbye.